Hi everyone. One question that comes up often is about the professional licensure. So let's ask it. Professor, you have earned both professional engineering licensure, the PEng, and the certified management consultant, CMC. For someone aiming management consulting, is CMC alone enough or does PEng add real value?
Okay, so it depends what industry you're focused on. So
Okay.
when I got the when I my original training was a 5-year apprenticeship in Northern Ireland, where my accent is from, in
Mm-hmm.
aerospace with the oldest aerospace company in the world, Short Brothers in Harlem, which became Bombardier Aerospace actually, and now is half of it is Boeing and half of it is Airbus. That's another story. It's in Belfast. So it was the most wonderful foundational training I could ever have imagined doing. I left school at 16 with O levels, British O levels. And then I did the technical courses, City and Guilds, Technical and Ordinary National Higher National Certificate. These are British qualifications, but the City and Guilds was my main. This is 1 day and 2 evenings per week. And then I got a degree afterwards. But my goal was to become a chartered engineer. I had no idea about management consulting, no concept of it. I was focused on engineering and I got into what was called composites, advanced composite materials applied to aircraft structures. And this was the early days of them. And so it was a new emerging technology. So I started to specialize in that. And I won't give you the early career stuff, what happened, but I was very technical. And this was also the advent of CAD CAM systems starting to come into the market, into the industry, as well as MRP, now called ERP systems. And so computers were just spreading like AI is today. AI is even more, it's even more disruptive. And I said, oh, I don't want to be sitting on a drawing board doing drawing, design work and tooling and manufacturing engineering. I want to learn about computers. I knew it was the future, just like AI and expert systems and all the rest of it nowadays. So I basically, I won't tell you all the things that happened, but I basically found my way into using CAD CAM systems, computer aided design. And then I became known as an expert at that, even though I had only like 6 months experience. IBM actually hired me I left de Havilland, where I was doing design of the outer leading edge of the Dash 8 aircraft, the tooling, the manufacturing process. It was wonderful work. I regret leaving it prematurely. I should have waited another 2 years, but I left it anyway and got into CAD CAM, and I worked for IBM on designing an aluminum backbone of a document transportation system. And in that job, I was probably 24 years, 25 years old. And in that job, they said, we sell CAD, it was called CADAM, CADAM. It's still around. Lockheed were the inventors of this software, but IBM had bought the license and were starting to sell it around the world. So in Canada, they were selling a CAD CAM system, but they didn't use it. So in the department I was in for the contract, it was in the at Don Mills in Eglinton. It was what was called the laboratory where they did a lot of the research and development on their new equipment. I was in with all these older engineers, mechanical design engineers and so on, electrical, mechanical, and they were all using the drawing board. But the boss at the time said, "Right, Stephen, we want you to learn this." And I says, "I learn it." So I'd work round the clock, and they paid me like for working to 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and coming in the next day at 8 a.m. And that's no joke. And got the money. It was just amazing. And they just because I learned and learned and showed the others how it was done. And that was the whole purpose. So I didn't know that at the time. So I couldn't figure out why I was getting resistance from these older people. Whereas one of them was Scottish and he was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant mechanical designer. And my mechanical design was nowhere near up to speed. But I could show I learned the CAD stuff. So they helped me with the mechanical design, but they hated that the fact that I was doing it on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first time that I was ever exposed to what was really a change management process, organizational change, teaching all these people. And there was a toxic atmosphere. They were not happy about this because they knew they were all in their 50s. So they still had at least 10 years of their careers left. This older Scotsman, he probably had about 5 or 6 years, but still, they may have carried him because he was a brilliant designer. But this was the first time I was ever exposed to change management. And even then, I didn't know it. It's only in reflection I knew it. But I was gung ho. So having the PNG was a big value with all those people. Many of them were not PNGs, but the fact I was a PNG gave me traction. I'd got chartered engineer in the UK and then a PNG here in Canada. And that gave me a basic credibility. But even then, some of them didn't like PNG because they thought, oh, the British guys who were in IBM at the time were apprenticeship trained. So they liked my apprenticeship, but they didn't like the degree. They thought that the degree, people with degrees don't really understand real practical stuff. I mean, there's all these prejudice goes on. So by having these credentials, apprenticeship, a PN, a chartered engineer, these sort of filled various ticks in the box. But really, when the PNs came in to help me, when I get into real management consulting, I hardly ever practiced true engineering other than as an employee. So I never needed my PNs because I never delivered any services to the public. So when you only need your PNs if you're stamping drawings, mainly in the public domain, you don't do it when you're working inside aerospace companies. They take responsibility for the drawings. They take responsibility for the aircraft performance, etc. But so the PNG, what was it then? What did it really? Well, it was a big thing in Canada. Like having a PNG in Canada did have great status because it was a license. Where in the UK, chartered engineer, nobody even knew what it was, even though it's high status among them, but not to the public. But in Canada, the PNG in the public eyes was a big thing. When it really helped me was when I was in the aerospace companies. Having that PNG when working with engineers was a huge benefit. Nobody ever told me that, but I know it. That gave me credibility. If I did not have that PNG and just came with my British credentials, the Canadians may have thought, well, he's not a real engineer. You see, they may have thought, oh, it's just the degree, maybe his degree wasn't like our degree, this kind of thing. The CMC never meant anything in terms of other people looking at it and giving it status. All it was a body of knowledge that when you completed it, you had broad skills in business administration and you had a deep pedigree in a specific function. You had something special, or you wouldn't have, to get it, you had to get to that level because the British chartered engineer was peer reviewed. They will fail you. So you could have your master's degree, your bachelor's or master's, because you have to have a master's degree for it. And you could have the years experience, 4 to 6 years, usually about 8 to 12, 14 years to get chartered engineer. But then you had to sit and interview with other people, peer reviewed, and it was in your area. So if you said, I'm a composites design engineer for aircraft structures, you're liable to be interviewed by people who that's what they specialize in. And they're going to grill you, and they fail you. They do fail people. They fail them in those peer-reviewed exams in Britain. In Canada, the PNG wasn't like that. You didn't have peer review. A degree and then the experience and then having people write in about you was very, very important. And then you sit the 2 exams for ethics and law. I think it was engineering law, which, wasn't that difficult, but it was still, you had to study it. But the PNG, all it did for me was said, okay, another tick of the box. None of the engineers, especially in aerospace or automotive, anywhere where engineering is a huge part of the enterprise and engineers play a big role, the PNG was an enormous piece of value just to have it tick. Because engineers are particularly very, very status conscious themselves. Engineering degrees, as you know, are very hard. They are among the hardest degrees that you can get, up there with, in fact, maybe even the most difficult. They say mechanical or chemical or electrical. They say civil slightly less difficult because it doesn't deal with rotating machinery and all, like all the equations of motion and all. But they say that these engineering degrees, all engineering degrees, are very, very demanding. So engineers themselves think of themselves slightly higher than about everybody else. And having that with them it ticked the box. That's all it did. Like nobody ever said it to me. It was in 40 years, nobody ever said, "Oh, you have a PN, so you have it and it's quiet and it's left." CMC, nobody cared about that. Nobody whatsoever. Nobody in industry knows what it means. They couldn't care less. And it's not a license. It's something between you and yourself and your own peer group.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know, Professor. I have.
Engineers look down on MBA types. I experienced all of that. I worked at my first major as well. I had many assignments, but my first big one was when Ernst and Winnie, which is now Ernst and Young in the States and KPMG in Canada, sent me to McDonnell Douglas in St. Louis to work on the future state vision for the development of military aircraft for McDonnell Douglas, now Boeing aircraft, Boeing military. And it was on the F-18, F-15, and AV-8B Harrier. And I worked with those engineers. Having my aerospace engineering background, having the apprenticeship and having the PEng was enormous respect from the McDonnell Douglas engineers. Plus, I knew what I was talking about. So I had to learn consulting on the job. And I was working with 4 Harvard MBAs from Ernst, all American. One was a colonel in the United States, retired colonel in the United States Air Force. And the other, they're all Harvard MBAs. And they were all brilliant, but none of them really knew the practicalities of engineering, product development in aerospace. That's where I kicked in. So my credibility and status was through the roof down there. And I learned the business side and the management from those people. And 2 of them are still around. A couple of them passed away, but 2 of them are still around in Cleveland. And I hope to visit them one day after 35 years or something. But it was the most wonderful experience. And that's another thing I can tell you. When you start in consulting, try to get really be a like build up brilliant skills, global skills where you are in demand globally for specific skills. And then from there, you'll meet the cream of the crop. You'll meet all other kinds of brilliant people. And if you're young enough, they'll bring you up with them as well. And you need to do that when you're under 30, usually. Under 30, I'll say 32. 30, 32, 34, 30. Just get under when you're under that to get, people that can bring you up with them and teach you the broader business skills. Anyway, go ahead.
So PH builds the trust and CMC builds the structure. Thank you for your time. See you in the next one. Bye.